What's up, everybody? Welcome to week 3 of the Dad Collective Captain's Log. Once again, everybody's welcome to listen, but I wanted to kick off this time by reminding y'all of something we talked about in week 2. I forgot to mention it in the Captain's Log, but I feel like it's important. It's the concept of Ebenezer. The Hebrew word Ebenezer, as we discussed, was for stone of help. Specifically in 1 Samuel 7:12, Samuel set up a stone to commemorate the victory God had given them. So from that point forward, the stone served as a road marker and a reminder of what God had done for the Israelites, of his power and protection. This was also done by Jacob in Genesis 28, verses 18 through 19, and in Genesis 35, verse 14, where he had also built an altar. Just as we should have Ebenezers and altars in our own lives that remind us of all God has done for us, and that he will be just as faithful to help us in our futures. And it's just like the song from, I think his name is Chris Renzimi or something, where it talks about, "And I will build an altar and stack it stone by stone, because every Ebenezer says I've never been alone." Such a great concept. I wanted to make sure I mentioned it in this one. Welcome to week 3. We discussed things like as fathers, we need to consistently pursue real love and model godliness to our children. Anything that is worth anything is worth a lot, as one of the guys eloquently put it. At times we may not feel like doing things, but feelings are fickle, and essentially they mean nothing. Marriage and parenting is hard work. And we looked at Jeremiah 17, verses 9 through 10, which, to sum it up, talks about how God understands the inner recesses of human motives, thinking, and decisions. And God is a just and merciful judge, because human will and emotions are deceitful, right? One of the guys was discussing how you can't share Jesus if you have no relationship with Jesus. And also, equally, it is difficult to share Jesus with others if you have no relationship with those people, right? Because that's how Jesus reached people. He built relationships with them and then shared the gospel. So we also took a look at Mark 9:50, which talks about salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can you make it salty again? Have salt among yourselves and be at peace with each other. And we discussed how in that passage, Jesus is encouraging his followers to be salty. In other words, he calls his people to live a life marked by righteousness and purity. In the ancient world, salt was also used as a preservative, not just for flavor. And in this passage, Jesus emphasizes the consequences of causing another brother or sister to stumble and fall into sin. Instead, we are called to spur one another on towards godliness, which cross-reference that to Hebrews 10:24. When we chase after holiness in every aspect of our life, peace with one another is a direct result. And so going over to that cross-reference, Hebrews 10:24 through 25, notice how it says we are to stir up or provoke one another in their love and their service/good works. This is because the perseverance of the Christian faith requires community and togetherness. We are to strengthen each other and build up each other's faith, because as it mentions, the day of the Lord will be here soon. And so we talked about how as a community, we should be salt in each other's lives, right? Spurring each other on. Don't hesitate to reach out. Don't hesitate to send that text, pray that prayer, even if that person doesn't respond. It's our duty to model and exhibit that community, that allelon. And as we mentioned previously, with the watchman on the wall in Ezekiel 33, I believe, God wants us to do our part, right? The watchman that does not warn the people, that people's blood is on that watchman's hand. So we just need to do our part. One of us plants, one waters, God does the rest. God purposefully calls us by name. And so we got to remember, David was called a man after God's own heart after he committed all of those sinful deeds. Right? So, we're not unworthy. Yes, it may be uncomfortable, but we need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And failure does not mean that the mission is canceled. Okay? Remember, community reflects God's nature. God himself is a relational being, existing as a Godhead composed of Father Yahweh, Son Yeshua, and Spirit Parakletos. In the high priestly prayer of John 17, we see in verse 21 that Jesus himself prayed for the unity of believers. Our unity as the Big C Church not only reflects the unity of the Godhead, but also points to our spiritual union and personal fellowship. It is very important. And that purpose of the fivefold ministry is to benefit and build up the Big C Church. And then we talked about giving your fear away. Don't let fear hold you back from joining community. Replace fear with the fear of the Lord and turn away from evil, which is a reference to Proverbs 3:7. We must abide in his word to be truly his disciples, as John 8:31 says, and stay in the fight. Abiding and obedience are crucial. And then we talked about how hearing from God is important so that you can kill your idols, toss away what God wants you to toss away. Like Paul said in 1 Timothy 4:10, we must train ourselves up for godliness, laying aside every encumbrance, every weight, as Hebrews 12:1 says, anything holding us back, we have to toss it aside and train ourselves up for godliness. And then we looked at Romans 14. But yeah, so as God himself models community, and Jesus prayed for us to have unity, as beings created in God's image, we are designed for relationship, not isolation. Thanks for listening to Week 3 Captain's Log. See you next week.